My guests today are all folks who were regular background on the show. So folks who are our Secret Service, uniform. Okay, guys, who's ever doing that?
It's
I'm so sorry.
John Juan.
John?
My cat is. I'm sorry. My cat is screaming at me for food, and she keeps on bothering me.
So you could actually get away with that, John, if you muted your mic during that time.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Tricks of the trade, you can mute, but when I'm talking and you're making noise, now I have to that's no good.
John Juan, you need to go home now.
I know. I look tired too.
How can I do my job if background are feeding?
I'm pantomime. I'm just gonna pantomime right now. Okay. All right. So there we go.
Hi, folks. Welcome to Below the Line, the podcast where we talk about what happens on set. My name is Skid. I was an assistant director in Los Angeles for the better part of 8 years, and now I'm not. Today we're going to be talking about The West Wing. On Rotten Tomatoes, they don't have a critical consensus, but here's the series info. Martin Sheen and Rob Lowe, as the U.S. president and his deputy communications director, play politics in this innovative Washington, D.C. drama series from award-winning producers John Wells, Aaron Sorkin, and Thomas Schlamme. The average tomato meter is 67%. The seasons are a spread of the high from the first season that came in at 93%. Sixth season was not as popular at 40%, so some spread on there. Now, I was on the show, just a note up front, as the DGA trainee for 10 weeks during this first season. For those who are not familiar, the DGA training program places DGA trainees on different shows in 10-week periods, so it's a sort of a rotating position. And then I went back to the show third season as the second assistant director. Now, my guests today are all folks who were regular background on the show. On a show like West Wing, we had a cadre of folks that we would bring back over and over again. They would play the uniformed Secret Service. They would play the staffers, other folks that we had on a regular basis, because it's certainly okay on a show like that to see the same people going back and forth. Now, it wasn't every day or every episode, but the scenes we had in the White House, we would start with the same group of folks. So these folks got to spend a lot of time with the actors and with the crew. David Katz, you were on all 7 seasons of West Wing.
Yes, I started Thanksgiving of the first season, and then season 2, I became Richard Schiff, Toby's stand-in for the rest of the run of the series.
Thanks, David. What are you doing now?
I am presently living in Austin, Texas with my wife and 2 kids, and I'm the girls' athletic director at a prep school.
Thanks, David. Thanks for joining us today. Annette Sousa, you were on the show for the better part of 6 seasons, you told me.
Yes, I was. And I started back in August of 1999 and continued through October of 2005.
And what are you doing now?
Currently, I'm up in Ottawa, Canada with my fiance, but I'm still, on occasion, I will work still in the entertainment industry. I've toured throughout Australia with a theatrical production, as well as done catering for HGTV. Numerous gigs that are still out there that I enjoy doing.
Well, Annette, thanks for joining us as well. And then finally, John Juan, you were also on the show for the better part of 6 seasons.
Yes, that's correct. And presently, I am a writer now, and I have 2 television pilots in consideration at Lionsgate.
Congratulations, John. Good luck to you on that front. But what do you guys think about that idea that you're spending time with the same people episode after episode, week after week? What was that like?
If I can just say something, it was incredible only because we became a family after a while, and we enjoyed working together. Not only the crew, but also the cast.
When I started on The West Wing, I had just come from a series a year before. I was on it for 2 years. That was so bitter and evil that when I started on The West Wing and everyone was nice, it all started with Martin. And to come onto a set like that after really, it was a really bad scene, the show that I came from. I didn't know if I could talk to the actors, and it was not like that. West Wing was wonderful. I mean, we're all family.
David, you mentioned there in passing, it started with Martin, and Martin Sheen really did set the tone, I think, on set for that show. If I can interject with a quick short story, I do know there were times when, if we had a very complicated scene with a lot of background, I did have to ask that the background not speak to Martin, not because he didn't want to be spoken to, but because if they engaged in a conversation, Martin would ask them about everything going on, and I might never get him to set. And we did have to make our shooting day. So we tried to work together as a team, the ADs and background, I think, as well. Not with you. The regular folks understood this and what needed to get done. But our folks who were day playing, Martin was just kind to everybody on the set.
Now, if I could add that before The West Wing, I was working with Tommy Schlamme and Aaron Sorkin on their other show, Sports Night, and I would like to say that they also created this really inviting, environment for all the crew and the background, and and they kind of transferred that ideology and that vibe over to The West Wing as well.
John, you talked about being on Sports Night. Had it all been regular shows for you, or was there a time when you were doing much more bouncing around set to set?
No, actually, I would say that Sports Night was the first show I got on. There was another show. I don't know if I should, name that other show too. It was also, it was a really good show. And I had to sort of choose because Tommy asked me, it's like, hey, do you want to come to the West Wing? I was like, I had this other offer to be on this other show, but I chose the West Wing because I felt, although the other show was very, very successful, I, felt there was more of a family feel to the West Wing, and something that, I felt on the Sports Night, and I wanted to continue that with the West Wing.
If I can just interject just quickly, is that I was also on Sports Night and I was there for the first season of that show. And so got to know Aaron and Tommy, pretty much everyone, Josh Molina, everyone that was on that same show. So I probably saw you, John Juan.
Well, actually, no, I came on the second season, so that's why we missed each other.
Over on that Disney lot.
Yeah,
you guys think you might have missed each other on Sports Night, but Annette, do you think it's common that background travel with producers to that degree?
I happened to be a tour guide at Warner Brothers during 2 summers, and saw Tommy on the lot and knew they were doing a new show, and had actually spoken to Tommy about the new show, and that's pretty much how I jumped ship from Sports Night to the West Wings. It was and got to know everyone. I had seen Llewellyn Wells and John Wells and everyone on the lot, and knew that there was something big coming up. So I had gotten to take my tours on the sets, on the West Wing sets, as they were being built initially back in 1999.
And I had started with the godfather of my children now, Jeff Kay, on numerous shows. And we worked with Neil Ahern, who became UPM and a producer on the West Wing. And when Neil got the West Wing, he said for me to come over and he'll get me on. And that's my in on how I got to the West Wing. So I've pretty much worked with friends and networking, and I was on shows that ran for a while.
It's the name of the game, is networking. You learn that real quick.
It's got to be a dream job, I think, for background then, to have people you like working with, and where it's stable enough, and there's enough scenes that, like, we spent 75 to 80% of our time in those sets, in the White House sets.
In that Christmas sweater, sometimes 75 to 80%, yes. Those Christmas episodes where we had to, for continuity, wear the same clothing for, 8, 9, 10 days in a row. I think I mentioned that to Skid.
Can I just say that to this day, I'm working with, predominantly I do 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And when I mentioned that I stood in for the Foo Fighters, John Bon Jovi, Sting on Studio 60, I came out and worked with, they don't care about the actors, they care about the performers, the singers, and that's where my niche is talking to the kids about music, and that makes me a rock star because I stood in for rock stars.
Yeah, I remember those standing in for the Foo Fighters with you over at the House of Blues. Yeah, that was a good time.
No, that was Foo Fighters were at the Maca Plain outdoor stages. That was who sings the song for Big Bang Theory? They do the intro to the Big Bang Theory, that band.
Oh, right.
Oh, Boom. Yeah. Like
That
I
was at
can
the House
picture
of
the
Blues.
band, but I just cannot
And
put the name.
that night when we filmed at the House of Blues and we heard the song probably 50 times, we ended up getting golden time, which is after 16 hours.
15.
The 16th hour at 16:01, you start making probably like $150 an hour because we went so long because of the music. It was an exhausting but wonderful day.
Now, put that day in a little bit of context. I'm not sure I remember the episode that you guys are referencing specifically. I didn't tell you we were going to restrict it just to third season episodes. Or was that? It's possible I've forgotten after this time. But no, so folks would come on the West Wing who were playing themselves, performers in real life. This is the opportunities you're talking about. Is that right?
Right. That was so much fun. And our show was so hot. We had Bill Clinton come walking through the set. I'm saying hi to Bill Clinton. Al Gore, I stood in for Al Gore when we did an episode of Saturday Night Live that they pumped into the live episode from LA. And
James Taylor's wife I stood in for that one time. Just to see James Taylor in person was amazing too.
We were blessed. Our show was so hot. It was wonderful.
So I want to revisit something, Annette, you were talking about earlier when you said you were a tour guide on the Warner Brothers lot. I know first season we were actually on two different stages. And when we were doing the walk and talks, where as Aaron Sorkin was famous for, two people or more than two people would be walking from office to office, room to room, having dialogue conversation. But there were times we would start on one stage and then have to do someone have to wipe right in front of the camera so that we could pick it up from the same spot over on the other side.
Yes.
And then, so that was pretty exciting that first season. Third season, they had put us on a larger stage where it was all connected now. We no longer had to do that little trickery, lose the time between stages.
Right.
But I think that's just reflects the commitment of Warner Brothers to the show over time.
Especially those basement scenes. Remember those? And Don had the Steadicam and he had to go backwards up the stairs. And I remember doing, having to continue scenes there as opposed to having everything on one stage.
Another area that I remember, and I'm curious for you guys, given that you guys were regular on the show, this was a show where the DGA trainee's primary responsibility was to oversee the background, to provide some leadership there and communication. In the beginning, as the second, I would do most of the setting, particularly when the trainee was new, but over time, we'd have the trainee setting more of the background as well. I'm wondering how that was for you guys. It's sort of this rotating position. It's only there for 10 weeks, different season to season, and particularly towards the end. I mean, honestly, you guys probably know better than a lot of the ADs about how to make one of these scenes work.
It got easier. It was secondhand after a while, after a couple of seasons. I mean, I think we all knew how the ADs wanted to set us, and we all knew, like, we all watched the show except for David, but we knew what we had to do to make the scene look good in the background. And I just remember I think it was probably somewhere in season 6 where our second Kerry Jones had made a bet with a first AD, or who was just a first AD for like just that episode, replacing somebody. And the bet was, I bet you that my background can set themselves, right? And I don't know what the wager was, but we did it, and it just went off without a hitch. And that first AD was like really, really surprised.
I know that it didn't always go off without a hitch. And I know when I was setting background, I would warn you up front, okay, this is going to be a suicide cross.
I think that first season, the way the sets were built, I just remember when they were doing walk and talks down one of the halls, I don't know who it was, there was, the fake doors leading to nowhere. They were actually leading just to behind a wall. And we were scrunched. There were 2 or 3 of us in between a wall and a door, and then had to pretend like we were coming out from another hall to do suicide crosses. And it was not easy because you really couldn't tell where the camera was at that point. It was difficult because you were hiding behind some things.
For those who are not familiar, to do a suicide cross is to actually cut right between the actor and the camera to give us a close wipe. And obviously, that's not something that's just happening in the background. A misstep or a miscue could ruin the shot.
Well, and going back to crosses and the most nerve-wracking scene that I ever had on the West Wing. And I had speaking parts, and I wasn't as nervous as this. We did a very long walk and talk, and it was a 3-minute walk and talk roughly. Tommy Shalami is directing, and I start out doing all these crosses in one scene, and the final scene is me taking off my sport coat and wiping the camera to take us to the next scene somewhere else. And if I mess this up, the entire 3-minute walk and talk is messed up. And I was petrified. We did numerous takes, and thank God I nailed every one of them. And that was nerve-wracking.
So when we did these walk and talks, like I had said earlier, that I think there were 10 to 20 folks that were regular, but we might have 30 to 40 folks in those scenes, more or less. What do you guys think?
No,
right around that amount, maybe even, a little bit less, a bit more, depending on what the scene was, obviously. So whether it was a party scene or something, whether it was just in the bullpen or something, they just needed extra background people.
Yeah. Or the Situation Room was mainly just the military and not too many more.
I took some pride because of my brief time in the military before coming to Hollywood. I just wanted to make sure that the right people were sitting at the table, and when they were doing salutes, they did it correctly, those sort of things. That was my one small contribution to my time on the West Wing as far as getting all that set. Now, a lot of the military folks, because they had fitted uniforms, they were regular folks as well, but for very limited scenes with that Situation Room. But we would bring other folks through the main sets and for the walk and talks. And then I remember matching up you guys, because you knew the sets in and out, with folks who maybe didn't as well. And so the two of you walk here, and then you'll pick up this person there. Any particular experiences for you guys that you're reminded of bringing in folks that maybe didn't work with us as regularly?
So we were filming one time in the Situation Room. Darren Scott was a background performer, and Lee Farinda standing in for some general in one of the scenes. And they had to read dialogue for the scene before the actors came in. And Darren Scott is reading dialogue, and he goes, "Special oops." And Lee's like, "Special oops? Special ops?" And Lee, bless his heart, when he'd start laughing, he couldn't stop.
He couldn't stop.
He's in tears. Oh my God. It was just, I wasn't even there, and I'm still telling the story 12 years later. That's how funny. Special oops.
Yeah, I've heard that story many a times, too.
But this is the greatest story of all time. Lee and I are filming near the Situation Room. We're the only two stand-ins that day. Tommy's working, and Aaron Sorkin comes to the set. And Lee has to tell Aaron, it was the episode that CJ goes and deals with their family back in Ohio, Alzheimer's, I think. And Lee felt compelled to tell Aaron Sorkin that it is the greatest episode he had ever written. He goes up to Aaron Sorkin and tells him last night's episode was the most wonderful episode of all time. It happens to be the only episode, the one and only episode that Aaron didn't write.
Oh, yeah.
I am in tears. I'm in tears. I have to walk away. I'm laughing. And Lee's standing there, dying a slow death. And Aaron goes, "That's the episode. The only episode I did." Aaron told him that. It is still the funniest thing that ever happened I had witnessed on the way.
Wow. Oh, Lee.
When you speak of those little oops on set, I'm reminded of a time that a buddy of mine was visiting Los Angeles, and I was working on the show. I brought him on, and he was going to do non-SAG background. You guys worked really hard to put him in the scenes and to make sure that he was walking in the spot where he could be seen and all the background crosses. Well, because we don't see the episodes until our lunch break, even on the day they're coming out, and we might be working at night, and so we might not see it before it actually airs. My friend in New York told all his friends and family to watch the show, and then it turned out that because of length, they had cut out the entire storyline we had shot those days. They were going to move it to another episode. But of course, because of wardrobe and such, none of those scenes were good anymore. So we had to shoot them from scratch. So everything that he was in ended up on the cutting room floor. He forgave me, but I don't know that he forgave the show.
I think for me, personally, the most difficult scene that I was working in was right after Christmas hiatus. And during the Christmas hiatus, I had hernia surgery. And and then I came back and I get placed like the camera's on my back. I'm the reveal. And I told Carrie, I said, hey Carrie, I just had surgery, so be easy on me. And I don't know why, but I think we did about 12 takes with me revealing the scene. So every time I had a reset, I was hobbling back to one, and it was so painful. It was so painful, but I got through it, and I think he saw how much, I wouldn't say pain, but I was really uncomfortable, and he finally let me sit down for a little while.
If I can just share just one skid, is when my mom was in a scene. She passed away last year at the age of 95, but she loved The West Wing, and she loved the fact that I was on there, and she would tell family and friends, and she loved Martin. She loved everyone. So it was actually a day that I was not working. Carrie had given me permission, as well as Dylan, to bring my mom to set. And perhaps she could she could watch the filming of the show. And so they decided, well, why don't we just put Lydia in a scene? So I brought her to wardrobe. She was so excited. And the scene was in front of Margaret's desk, and Lenore happened to be standing at one of the file cabinets. And Mom's cue was just to cross behind Lenore and just do a cross.
Lenore, one of our other background artists, one of our other regular background artists.
Yes. So Mom is on one side of the room, and I'm actually on the other, kind of ready to cue her. And she saw my cue. She saw everyone. She was so excited. But she decided on her own to stop and start chatting with Lenore at the file cabinet. And I'm standing on the side, waving my arms frantically, trying to get Mom to get away and just to keep crossing. She thought it was the best thing just to stand right there, right on camera. So she continued for just a moment. She wasn't audible or anything, but and of course Lenore remained in character, and Lenore was a good sport. So Mom ended up just continuing her cross after that. But I was a nervous wreck for a few minutes. Good memories.
I want to follow up on we mentioned Martin again and how great he was to everyone there. So great. I know third season, and I believe it became a regular event. He took all the regular background, and I know the ADs got to go, and some other number of the crew to Vegas, all expenses paid. That was quite an experience.
And cast.
He took some of the cast, and we also played bingo. We would play bingo on two different buses. I think, was it $20,000 he gave away?
I think he gave away, if I recall correctly, the way I tell the story is he gave away $10,000 cash on the bus. And it included, I think there were 30 people on a bus, and there were 25 door prizes of $100 or something. Just so where I think the 20,000 comes up is because on the way home, he said, next year we're going to play both ways.
On my bus was Catherine Justin and John Spencer sitting directly behind me. I believe we were in Barstow. We had stopped to go to the bathroom. There was inside the bus, there was a bee or a fly was on the front windshield. I'm not sure if anybody remembers this, or they were on my bus. Catherine got up with a newspaper, determined to kill whatever was on the front windshield. She runs up and smacks the windshield so hard that it cracked the windshield.
I was there. I saw that, and Catherine Justin looked up, and she was just like, "Oops!"
The look on her face.
Yeah. I mean, we couldn't believe, how did you just crack the windshield of a bus with a newspaper?
And just one more quick story is, I think we were still in Barstow. Martin wanted to stop to get a card. I think it was Thanksgiving. We parked the bus in the parking lot, and Martin Sheen gets off the bus. And of course, people who are in the parking lot spot him and come running over. And he realized at that moment, going to the mall at that time probably was not a good idea.
Can I just say the story, if I have to describe how wonderful Martin was, we were filming one night at the Olympic Auditorium, and it was a flashback scene where he's the governor, and there's all these elderly people at probably 10 different tables, and they're seated. They cannot leave. The ADs are like, you stay put. Nobody move. And it's late at night. Martin grabs bottles of water and chips and snacks and is handing it out to all these people that were just had to stay seated. He's a wonderful man. He's just the sweetest soul, and we were blessed to work with him.
That was Martin.
What memories do you guys have of maybe where things made the background work was particularly difficult?
I think it was probably when we had to work such late hours. We were doing, 12, 14, 15-hour days, working until early in the morning sometimes, having to get there so early. And being on location, made it difficult because we weren't at home on the Warner Brothers lot. So it was an entirely different place for us to be. Although we had each other, I think it was just the environment was just so different.
Yeah, I think usually when we were on location, I remember this the one time we were downtown at the convention center. It was just crazy. It was really like the president was downtown, and we had so much background, so much crew, so much security. It just became logistically like a nightmare. Sometimes it was just very confusing in terms of, I think, for the AD teams, the PAs to organize, all these people plus crew. Those times with those big scenes, it just takes a lot out of everybody.
I do know that I think it was the end of the third season. It's the episode where Martin is deciding whether or not to assassinate a foreign leader, I believe, where he's going to shoot down his plane. And it's meant to cut back and forth between him making these decisions and then a play that's going on. But we didn't have the full episode written by the time we started filming. I know that we had a huge full cast of actors, audience members, as you can imagine, is filling a stage hall. And I don't think much of it is actually in the episode. That could be some of the challenges on that show as well. Sometimes we were filming a little bit ahead of when things were written.
One of the seasons, towards the end, we were waiting on pages. And you've got a full cast and crew waiting on pages, and we would just take a break. For us, it's great. We get to relax, go to craft service, go sit on the back deck. But it was stressful. There's the ADs and producers. When a union crew is sitting around doing nothing, the bigwigs are very, very stressed at that moment.
And just to add to David's story, since I was on the second season of Sports Night, which ran simultaneously with the first season of The West Wing, you had Aaron, who was writing the scripts for both shows. And there were days on Sports Night where we would also just sit around with no pages to shoot because Aaron and Tommy were on The West Wing shooting.
I just remember that when we would have those, I would go in the back and run dialogue with Richard, Schiff, Toby. And I remember the first time I ever did it, I forget who the PA was, but she's like, do not act. He hates that. And I didn't do it. And I started running dialogue with Richard pretty much all the time in the back on the deck.
I think I ran lines with Richard once, and it was the first time. It's always very nerve-wracking because I didn't get any of those notes from any PA. So I guess I'm not a very good actor, so he never said anything to me.
I remember I was in the bullpen once, and Martin walked up and gave me his sides and just said, "Can you run lines with me?" And I just thought, okay, here we go. Because I knew him and I knew what he was like and everything. It wasn't too bad, but that was pretty much putting me on the spot. Happened to be in the right place at the right time, I suppose.
The saddest thing for me is we didn't have camera phones back then. We lived it, we were there, but that's the sad part for me is I wish I could have documented it better because we saw some amazing and did some amazing things.
I don't know if I would. I mean, if we had camera phones back then, smartphones, I mean, I don't think we would have been allowed to record all the stuff that we experienced. I'm sure we could have gotten some nice footage, especially from like the parties, like the wrap parties or the Christmas parties. Those were always really fun. It's like for me personally, I think remembering those moments seems to be a little more magical.
You're right. The thing that, because I knew I was moving after the show ended, and Doug Ornstein, the first AD on the show, he told me that he would always bring a baseball and a pen and a Sharpie. So when the show ended, I have baseballs with things from, not Rob Lowe, Martin, I have a baseball from Martin and from Brad and from Richard. And then I came out and worked on Studio 60, and he said, you're standing in for Sting. So it's Sting's final day, and I've got my baseball and Sharpie, and PA's walking Sting to his trailer, and I come up behind him, I'm like, excuse me, Sting, can you sign my baseball? And he's like, totally blown up. He's never signed a baseball in his life. And he was so happy to do it. And I still have my Sting baseball, all because of Doug Ornstein.
That's funny.
Other stories off the top of folks' heads?
I mean, there's so many. If I can just share one thing, we spoke about, important crosses, I think. I was asked at one point to go into the mural room with a tray full of glasses filled with water, whatever it was. And Don Thoren had decided to start the camera off on my rear end as I walked into the mural room. So that was kind of I had to pretend as though I was crossing from somewhere else and go right into the mural room. Had to open up the doors myself with this tray, and then had to bring everything in myself into the mural room and set the tray down.
I had a mural room story as well. There was a time when they wanted to cross. I think Martin and John Spencer were leaving the mural room, headed towards the Oval Office. And behind them, there were some dignitaries that the meeting was just finishing up. And they wanted a steward in a tuxedo to push in the cart going in the other direction and start cleaning up. But we hadn't cast anybody as a steward. And all of our background were committed to other scenes we had. And so, but I was like, darn it, bring me the tuxedo. And so I put the tuxedo on myself and pushed it through. I do have that queued up on my Netflix now. So when I have company over at the house, they have to watch my one little bit of background work on West Wing. But that was my experience. And even that little bit was nerve-wracking for me at the time.
Well, there were many times when David Katzen and I had to dress as Marines and stand outside the doors because, of course, like we both had short hair and we both had like that slight build that we could fit into those uniforms back then. And yeah, so we did a lot of double duty when we didn't have enough background to play Marines.
The uniform folks were often the same people because the uniforms were fitted. Those folks would visit wardrobe on another day to make sure that wasn't something you tried to fix when you were trying to film. So we saw some of them regular, but not as often. I do remember a Marine scene, also third season, where it was a large, some sort of reception hall where there was actually a row of Marines and Martin was arriving as the president. And I spent a good 15 to 20 minutes, which was a lot of time in an AD's day on set, teaching these 6 young kids how to salute. I haven't watched the scene in a long time, but to get them to all snap it correctly and at the same time, I do hope that made the final cut.
Can I tell you a quick story? It's supposed to be late at night, and I think it was late at night, and it's John Spencer walking into Josh Malina's office, and it's end of the night. There's one person in the bullpen room, so they put me at a desk, and I'm supposed to be on the phone late at night. And John's walking from the hallway, and he's off camera in the beginning, and I'm on the phone. I'm talking to play talking. After like 5 takes, John Spencer came up to me and goes, "David, are you really on the phone talking to someone?" I'm like, "No, John." And I'm like, that was the biggest compliment you could ever give a background artist. You did it so well. You really thought I was talking to someone.
One of my first few days there on set on the West Wing, I was put into the Oval Office with everyone. And I walk in, and one of the first people that I see is beloved Bradley Whitford on all fours doing an imitation of a cat with a hairball. And I just thought, okay, this is the best set to be on because they're just such nice, funny people. And it was just, they made me feel at home and a little nervous, but not really, with all of that going on around me, and just really, good people to be with.
Oh, and I guess I should maybe mention how I started to draw cartoons on set.
Oh, right.
And the caricatures of the crew and the cast and the producers and Skid as well. And that was like something that I just kind of started like because we had so much downtime on set, and I was a visual arts major back in college, and so I would doodle a lot, and just started off just doodling, just maybe some of the background, and then it just started to catch on with the crew, and then then the crew would be asking me about, it's like, hey, can you draw a caricature of me, and then over the seasons, once you get to know everybody and you become a family, then it's like you kind of pick up on everyone's quirks and idiosyncrasies, and then there were so many like funny moments that occur on set. And so like on my downtime, I started to draw these cartoons about like something that happened on set with somebody, and it was all in jest, and it was just fun, and it was never meant to make fun of anybody. And after a while, I was asked by Tommy to do that as part of my job. Basically, I think the reason for it was because of the long hours that we work, and just to interject some fun and levity to our long work hours. I think everybody got a kick out of those cartoons that I drew for the show.
John, I had forgotten about that, but I think I still have that. It's probably in a frame somewhere with my moving around since. I think it ended up in a box, but yeah, I remember that as well.
Yeah,
and John, you parlayed that. You parlayed that into Studio 60.
I did. I did. That was the only thing I did on Studio 60 was, I was hired by a production just to draw. So yeah, that was not too bad. Not too bad.
I think speaking of John Spencer, just wanted to say a moment how great it was working with him, and that he is truly missed.
I was backstage with him numerous times, and both of us were big gardeners. And he would talk about his maple trees, his Chinese maple trees at home, and how many he had, and just such a very, very sweet man, and of course dearly missed, and everything from his mocha coffee drinks to his Nike slide shoes to just his demeanor. He was just the nicest man. So I miss him very much.
And on that note about John, how about the cinnamon toothpicks that he would always offer up to all of us?
I totally forgot about those.
Such a nice man. I love John.
Let me ask you guys some more generic questions about background work in general. Pretty reliable, pretty regular hours. That seems like a great gig, although I can still imagine it might have been challenging.
From my experiences, I was actually working on other projects at the same time. So I would get on projects and at times not be able to get onto the West Wing again because I was so busy with something else. But I was working on lots of other films and television projects, and as we mentioned before, in networking. And so that's how I got to work on a numerous amount of other projects. And I forget, exactly what I've worked on because it's been so long. But on the other hand, when you're working so often, it's almost all just a blur, and you really don't realize how many shows you've worked on until you get that notice from is it the SAG Foundation, whatever, letting you know how the shows that you worked on in order to get your benefits, and they would accrue and show you exactly what you've been doing. I would get those in the mail occasionally, and I'd be like, wow, I totally forgot I worked on that.
I would say that the casting director for The West Wing, for the background, came from Central Casting. And so the casting director who did The West Wing would do other shows. So if you were requested back on a show, that meant that you were doing something right. And that meant that, hey, that you were trusted, that you did a good job. And if that was the case, then they would put you on another show, because they would trust that you would do well and on that show. And I mean, that's how background get work, is because you do good work on a show. And if you're lucky enough to be a regular on one show, the chances of you getting more work on other shows, it's going to happen.
Good. I'm not sure who exactly. I mean, I know a bunch of us were requested by the movie Collateral Damage with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Were you guys on that with? Because I was on that. Lenore was on that. They requested the background of The West Wing because of our appearance, how professional we were. our demeanor, of course, our clothing, to look as though we worked in that office where Arnold was. And so we were working on a few projects, it seems like, at one time. So
I was not on Collateral Damage, and I'll have to check to see, because if anyone over there had asked me, I would have told them about how much trouble that they were bringing in. What did I do on West Wing that episode? Like, all right, I guess I'm going to fill in off the bench the entire group if all of you guys are over on your big
while
movie
Lenore
set.
and I
Wow.
were doing Lenore and I were doing stunts over on the Collateral Damage set. You'll have to ask her about that. We were diving under tables.
Can I go back to what Annette was saying? The most important thing for background actors, insurance. Getting our insurance is
Right.
so important. Making enough to get insurance, making enough to get another year in our pension.
And David, when you're talking to the kids at your school now, they don't get excited about the insurance and the vesting year to year.
No,
That's not one of the
they'd much
stories
rather
that really gets their excitement going about wanting to get into background work.
The one story they all know that I was on a show, Numbers, where I blew up on the beginning intro of the show. They all know
I know
that
that.
blew up on Numbers. And the parents, the kids don't watch West Wing. The parents, every parent watched it when it was on. So there's a lot of West Wing fans. I mean, we were.
Oh, there's
you don't
so many.
So many, and we don't talk about it when you're in LA. When you get out of LA, we're rock stars. I mean, people want to know about the show and what we did and what are the actors like. So it's really sweet.
I have a funny story to tell. I was Melissa Fitzgerald had invited me to her launch of her PSA for Justice for Vets, and so it was taking place over at Warner Brothers. I went to it and I stood in for Peter James Smith on the West Wing, who plays Ed on the show.
Or was that Larry?
Nobody knows. But there were other people that were invited to the launch, and they were just fans of the show. I got mistaken for Peter a lot of times.
Oh no.
Like initially, I wasn't like I didn't realize that, right? And then people were just like asking me questions about the show and so on, and I was like, yeah, this is great. And then all of a sudden it was just like, oh wait a minute, these people think that I'm Peter James Smith.
I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to visit the actual West Wing because my wife was working for the executive branch at the time, and you could sign up for little tours. And so we got to go and walk through it. I got to admit, I think our set was better than theirs. We had more windows and more to see, and just the actual West Wing, it felt kind of cramped and crowded, and our folks added improvements to it that I think could have gone back the other direction. I was always a little disappointed in the real thing. Other thoughts?
I just want to touch on, we had the greatest cinematographer, Tom Del Ruth, working on our show. For the one time we were filming close to Paramount and he made the sun. I didn't realize how amazing it was until you start talking to like the gaffers and electricians, and they're like, what he's doing right now is genius. The things that he did, how beautiful our show looked. It was wonderful. And touching on another thing, I just want to say, as a background performer with these walk and talks, foot foam, you had to have the right shoes on.
Yes.
These were so important because you'd have some non-union person show up with click-clack shoes, sound would go bonkers. So there's this foam that you would stick onto the bottom of your shoes, and it was foot foam. And we all had the right shoes. The regulars, we knew what shoes to wear. But some of these people would click and clack and drive sound nuts.
One more serious memory from that time we worked together is we were all on West Wing during 9/11.
If I can just share, I was getting ready at my apartment to get ready to leave, and my neighbor came running over to tell me what had happened. I had gone anyways to Warner Brothers, and that's when, they were letting people know that we couldn't come in, that we had to go home and all of that. But I just remember the memorial that we had on the back lot. Warner Brothers has their own fire department. And so I remember that they had this huge flag that they unfurled. And not only was our show, the cast and crew members from our show there, other shows were there too on the back lot. And it was just very, very emotional. You couldn't even really digest what was happening. It was just to see everyone and just to speak and just to be together was so important. To go through that was just, something I'll never forget.
So then when we'd go to work, they'd stop every car and search it. That completely changed after 9/11 for all of us. Coming into the lot took a lot more time. They told you to get there super early because it was a backup. They went through backpacks. And they looked underneath our cars in the trunks. It was serious.
Yeah, I think that was when the regular background, when we actually started getting our own studio badges so that we could get in quicker. And yeah, I just remember shooting that episode where Aaron just wrote this play, and it was very different than all the other episodes because it was just one of those standalone episodes where it had nothing to do with like the story arcs for the season. And I just remember how I don't want to say dark, but just the vibe on the set was just very kind of touch and go, and everyone was just, I don't know, it was definitely, it was a strange time for sure.
I'm not sure that was one of our best reviewed episodes. When we talk about that season coming in at 50%. Well, to end on a lighter note, let me say it's been great seeing you guys. Any last memories that you recall from those days?
I'll always go back to Martin and how he was towards not only us, but for instance, the security guards that were around our stage. And one evening it was just so chilly, none of the guards had their jackets on. I happened to be there. He asked, why don't they have their jackets? It's so cold out here. And the guard said, we never got our jackets. They told us that we're not going to be getting them for a while. The next day or two after, they had their jackets. And they had said that it was because Martin put in a word for them. So he cared for not just us, the cast and crew and everyone, but also everyone that was around us, that was part of our family, our extended family.
For me, last day of shooting, one of our executive producers, Alex Graves, I was just kind of like in one of the quarters by myself, and he was coming through and he saw me, and I know, David, you were around, because what happened was that Alex just came up to me and just thanked me for all my contributions and for all the years that we were all together as a family. And I was like, oh, that's really, really nice. And then Alex left, and I just remember, David, you came up to me and you said, Johnny, do you know how special that is for Alex to come up to you and say that to you? It didn't register just because we were such, we were all like one big family. It was our West Wing family. And, sometimes it was a little dysfunctional, but, in the end, it was just a time of our lives where there was a lot of good things happened, and we all shared that together. We'll always have that, and we'll always have all our friendships because of the West Wing.
Can I just say that there were, I think, 70 or 72 babies born during those 7 years on the West Wing, because we knew I had my two ADs had their kids, but we knew we were coming back. And to know that you're going to have income for the next year is big in our business,
Yeah.
And there were so many kids born, and it was just, that was wonderful. Yeah, there were some crazy times, but it was one big family.
It's really great memories, and I really appreciate you guys spending the time today walking down memory lane. It's been fun. That concludes our show, but it's only half of what we want to say about the West Wing. Next episode, I'll continue the conversation with a new group of background. Hopefully there won't be any trouble with continuity. Thanks, as always, to Curtis Five for our music and John Wan for our logo. And as always, please send email feedback to skid, SKID, at belowtheline.biz. That's BIZ. There's also a Facebook page. You can find us at Podcast Below the Line, one word. We'll see you next time.